Ahead of me, just visible in the mist and the low cloud, is the coast of Cornwall. This coast has seen many a warship, many a shipwreck. It's an eerie, mysterious place, slightly forbidding perhaps. It gives nothing away, no hint that this is an island of extraordinary variety. An island that so inspired one man in the 16th century, he thought he could make it the most famous in the world.
2 years before the Spanish Armada sailed up the English Channel in an attempt to seize Elizabethan Britain for Spain, a book was published in London which would take hold of Britain in a very different way. The year was 1586, the book was called Britannia, and it would transform the British Isles. This lost masterpiece is a work of staggering genius. Nothing like it had ever been seen before. For the first time, the entire British Isles have been described in great detail, an encyclopedic tour of the whole country in a single book. Elizabethan readers could hold Britain in their hands. The name on the title page is William Camden. Unlike his contemporary William Shakespeare, Camden is scarcely known today, and yet for 150 years this book was the first port of call for anybody needing to know anything about Britain.
This was an era in which the hopes of Britain were staked on world exploration, on the foreign adventures of Drake, Hawkins and Raleigh. But William Camden put all his faith in the landscape and people of Britain. Britannia explores England, Wales, Scotland and Ireland, and that's just what I'm planning to do too.
Like everyone else, when I was at school, I learned the big history of the Elizabethans, the politics, the power marriages, the beheadings. But what I've always been fascinated by is what ordinary Elizabethan life was like, the life of the land. That's what I'm going to investigate in this three-part series. I'm going to rediscover what I can of Camden's Elizabethan Britain.
Britain is seated, as well for airs as soil, in a right fruitful and mild place. The air so kind and temperate, that not only the summers be not excessive hot, by reason of continual gentle winds that abate their heat, but the winters are also passing mild.
Britannia was hugely ambitious. How could Camden make Britain the most famous island in the world? That sort of claim required evidence. Evidence of a unified nation. A nation rich in natural resources. A nation steeped in enterprise and common purpose. So Camden set out to make the first county-by-county study of Britain. What he produced was an Elizabethan national treasure, the British Book of Self-Belief. And it all started in Cornwall.
From Britannia, I've picked the places that are going to reveal the best of Elizabethan Britain. There's Port Eliot on Plymouth Sound, which was a centre of religious, commercial and naval power, so that's got to be worth a look. Exeter, where Camden writes of an extraordinary feud between a local aristocrat and the people of the city. A Roman amphitheatre in South Wales. And then the place Camden describes as the British Alps. For you and me, the spectacular mountains of Snowdonia. My final port of call in England is the Lake District, and my guide for the next 1,500 miles is this book, and it's going to open the door into a lost world.
Each one of Camden's county entries begins with his comments on the county's name. Cornwall, he believes, derives from Kernor, the old British word for horns, the horns being the promontories scattered along the coast. The Cornish people, he says, are hardy and courteous, but what Camden admires is their enterprise. They fertilise the poor soils with seaweed to produce corn. They mine tin for export throughout Europe, and they risk the dangerous seas to catch a dozen kinds of fish by the boatload. Camden's Cornwall is a cornucopia, a horn of plenty. Is there any present-day evidence of that? I've come to Newquay to meet up with Phil Trebilcock, who's been crab fishing around this coast for over 30 years. How does 21st century fishing compare?
Very good to meet you.
Yes.
How many pots are we picking up?
Well, as many as you like to pick up.
How many have you got out there?
500.
500?
Yeah.
Today, fish accounts for only 3 to 4% of our diet. But in Elizabethan times, the figure was nearer 25%. The livelihoods of fishermen were supported by laws prescribing fish days on Fridays, some Wednesdays, and throughout Lent. Break the law with a plateful of meat, and you could end up in prison or the pillory.
How are crab stocks out here? Are there plenty of them down here?
I would say on the north coast of Cornwall that the lobster stock and the crabs and the spiders are in good order. 50% of what we catch is going back into the sea, live for maybe next year or the year after.
Are there plenty of young fishermen coming into this business? Because it's kind of dangerous, wet and cold, isn't it? It doesn't appeal to everybody.
No, it's unfortunately there aren't. And one of the main reasons why is that when we started, we had very little paperwork, but you followed on a tradition, and you were keen, you were young, you were full of it, The first time you caught a lobster, well, you thought he was King Kong,
In the medieval past, there had been a religious duty to eat fish. But the Elizabethans valued their fishermen for more practical reasons. They played a vital part in the country's defences. In 1582, there were 2,000 fishermen in Cornwall and Devon, and they were the Navy's sailors.
Wow, he's beautiful, isn't he? Yeah, massive.
That male spider.
Now, do you like eating crab yourself, Phil?
I do, yeah.
He's absolutely beautiful, isn't he?
As a preference, I would just soon have a nice crab sandwich that's paid £25 for a lobster. I really do.
You know, back in the Elizabethan days, it was a poor man's food sometimes. They said it was sufficient to preserve life, but not enough to please the appetite. Whoa, look at the lobster! Yes! Whoa, fantastic! I've never ever seen one taken out of the sea before. That's amazing.
Nice Cornish lobster.
Isn't that incredible? Yeah.
Cornwall was a fine county in the 1580s, but this was an era of change. I'm on my way now to a place Camden knew as Port Eliot. Behind me is the village of St Germans, and the river here is the Liner. The water could get quite shallow, so ships had to drag a chain behind them to stir up the silt and keep the river navigable.